What's going on, guys? Waco from Evolution here with a horological superhero. He looks like a mild-mannered guy, but he's actually like Maverick in Top Gun trying to break Mach 10 every day of his life. His name is Lucas Raggi, and he's the Chief Industrial Officer of AP. How are you, brother?
Good.
Yeah.
You make me red.
No, it's true. It's true. And when I say like he's doing some of the most important work in watchmaking, I want to talk, of course, about the RDs, the research and development projects. So let's kind of go through that a little bit. Actually, no. What I want to say first is congratulations, because you guys are doing some of the most important work in modern watchmaking. Why? Well, I'll give you an interesting statistic. From 2023 to 2024, 85% of the growth in the watch industry came from watches 50,000 Swiss francs and above. And then now let's talk about how do you put content into a watch. Well, you could put gold or diamonds and increase the price that way. But my favorite way is to put watchmaking content into the watch, right? And what is watchmaking content? There's a couple of things you can do. Either you're trying to evolve a known complication, you're trying to improve its performance significantly, you're trying to look at better chronometric solutions, or you're trying to give better indications of our relationship to the solar system, right? And Luca and RD5, or Luca and the RD watches from AP have been doing some of the most important work in this field. So let's go maybe reverse chronological. Okay. And we're going to start with the RD5. So Luca, explain to us what the RD5 is.
So basically RD5, we wanted to create a new chronograph, and we wanted to really enhance the sensation of how the user interacts with the watch, the sensation of the push pieces, the crown, and we were inspired by, the smartphone, like you have the volume adjustment pushes. So we created a total new mechanism. We had to really abandon everything we knew about mechanical architecture of the traditional chronographs, and we built that new one just from start. And we replaced, the hammer and heart mechanism to reset the chrono by a new racket and pinion. It allows us to store the energy and release it instead of getting the energy from your fingers.
So what I love about this watch is it takes the traditional weakness of a chronograph and it makes it its superpower, right? So normally in a chronograph, you have a loss of energy because of various spring jumpers and friction springs that you need to overcome for not only the chronograph seconds hand, but also the counters. Right? But here you don't have that. In fact, you have a storage of energy inside of all of the counters as well for the reset mechanism, which is released anytime you press the reset function, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But it sounds like a cool idea, but to create that, you needed a complete reimagining of how a chronograph works. So Luca, how did you do that?
So you're right. The idea is we use the same energy, but instead of using it through frictions, through springs that are necessary, we keep them and we store that energy by loading some springs.
Is it these?
Yes.
Okay.
So the energy is stored into the mechanism, like from here, especially here.
Right.
So imagine if I take it like this, okay? So the energy is through that spring here.
Right.
And so when you want to reset the mechanism, you just click on the pusher, and it's working like the grand sonnery, When you have the minute repeater and the grand sonnery, you just liberate the string.
That's really cool.
Instead of really having to push through the hammer and heart.
So what you guys see is when you see the chronograph seconds wheel turning, you see the rack is turning as well, right? And as the rack moves, it's changing its position and it's tensioning this spring here, which is what stores the energy for the reset, which is really cool.
Correct.
And then when it gets to the end, it just continues to turn. Is that right?
Yeah. And of course,
so is there a minimum amount of time it needs to turn first in order to store the energy for the spring?
No, it stores from the second one. And of course, when you get to 60 seconds, it jumps back to 0.
Wow.
Okay?
So as soon as you go to the first tooth, already there's enough energy in the tension spring. Wow.
Getting back to 0.
Yeah. That's so cool. It's funny because I remember Giulio Papi showing me this rack system almost 10 years ago when he was imagining it for a reset mechanism for a split-second chronograph. So in fact, this has a lot of different applications, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what I love about this watch is this. So I don't know, maybe this camera can take a close-up. This is, to me, what high complications need to be, right? High complications that are incredibly wearable Really elegant. Look at that, 8.1 mm in terms of thickness, right? There's a flying tourbillon there, of course, but it's also incredibly discreet. And we had a conversation with John Mayer about this, right? Oh, incidentally, Lucas just starred on a CNN talk show with John Mayer as well, so very cool for that. And it's, you don't even realize it's a chronograph initially because the pushers are so subtly integrated into the case band. So then, you press it here to stop the chronograph, you press it here, and the tactility of this is like effortless, right? Because they want to change the whole sensation of how a chronograph feels. But it's amazing to wear on the wrist because, again, it's something that you keep for yourself. Now, another thing that you might keep for yourself is the beauty of the movement. Luca, walk us through this incredible majesty here, dude.
So it's a self-winding mechanism, but we have used a peripheral rotor just to be able to show the beauty of the movement. So we have used platinum for the material of the weight, but you can see that you can go through the mechanism, and this rack and pinion system, in fact, you have it 3 times. You have it for the second, for the minute, for the hour.
Dude, I love it. It's so nice. Okay, so we've talked about RD5, and RD5 is, it's, again, you do wonder, like, how would you spend thousands of hours of research and development to create something that is not really necessary? Well, that's the whole point of high watchmaking, is to make that courageous step. And Lucas said something really interesting. When you start the journey, you don't know where it's going to end, right?
No, not at all.
Right? And you take that leap of faith to try to improve these mechanical systems, because without that innovation, honestly, our industry comes to a stop. And I think that's why I love the R&D projects from AP. Okay, let's go backwards from this to RD4, which, we'll show you a close-up of that as well. So RD4 is a grand complication that incorporates a split-second chronograph, perpetual calendar, and also a striking system as well, right?
Plus the tourbillon.
And why not? And a tourbillon. So the thing is, when the AP decided to innovate, it didn't innovate in terms of like, let's add more complications. No, they did something else, which I think is maybe even more important. They thought about, what is the person's experience in terms of owning this watch? Correct, Lucas? So explain to me how you guys decided to make the world's most foolproof, intuitive, and easy to use grand complication in RD4.
Yeah, so the idea was we want to build a grand complication first. And we started by designing the dial in order to place the informations, and we started a reflection by thinking how I will adjust the functions. So before drawing anything, we were just doing sketches about the dial and the user mode, in fact, because we wanted to have no user mode. So we said, okay, we're going to build some complications, but every one of them has to be very intuitive in the way you adjust it.
Absolutely incredible. So I love this. This is a watch with all these functions that's impossible to break or use incorrectly. Traditionally, grand complications, there's this term called boomerang, where like they come out of the factory after someone has spent basically a year making it. It goes to the owner, and then he'll do something like pull out the crown while the watch is striking or something, or operate the split-second chronograph like with, in the wrong sequence, and then you break the watch. The thing that I love about this timepiece is it understands that most of the people who buy that kind of watch can just want to put it on their wrist and use it. And so that was really cool. So now let's go from RDT, we're going to go backwards to John Mayer's favorite RD, which is the RD3, which in some ways is the hardest to understand, right? So talk to me about this incredible ultra-thin high amplitude flying tourbillon.
So on the RD3, the idea was, about the Swiss level escapement, you have a limit. I don't know how you call it in English when you reach that limit, but you're limited in the amplitude.
Right. Okay, just for you guys to understand, amplitude is when you have a balance wheel, it's how high it swings, right? And you want something with a relatively high amplitude because it creates greater autonomy and shock resistance. So go on.
And so you start from that, and every time you add a complication, you lose that amplitude until eventually you lose accuracy or the watch stops.
Right.
So we thought about how to extend that limit, in order to be able to store in the same balance wheel, in the same watch, more energy, so that when you have complications, you are still at a very good level of amplitude. So we modified the pure geometry of the anchor while keeping a Swiss level escapement in order to be able to push that boundary about 30 degrees more than a traditional Swiss leather escapement.
So is that tourbillon also being used, for example, here and in the RD4?
Correct. In
Okay.
that RD5 too.
And then RD5. So the thing is, if you didn't have this high amplitude tourbillon, you wouldn't. If every time you added a complication, you would take away amplitude, meaning you'd be robbing the watch from chronometric performance. And now you have something that's like a tractor, basically. You can put anything you want on top of it. Okay, so let's go backwards from there to RD2, which was, at the time of its launch, the world's thinnest perpetual calendar. Now, this watch is an absolute revelation. Talk to me about RD2.
So RD2, the same. We started by saying, okay, with the complications, sometimes you end up with a watch that is quite thick. And we wanted to build the complication that could go under your sleeves, And we found a way on a perpetual calendar to integrate several layers of functional components and merging them into one layer.
That's fantastic.
And we saved like 3 additional layers, and we were able to build the perpetual calendar into only one layer. So we end up with a watch that is really thin.
What's the thickness of the watch?
It's 6.3.
So this watch is kind of crazy because when you look at it, there's just insane tension between looking at it from the front, where it's like very purposeful, muscular looking. And then as you start to turn it on the side, it just like almost disappears, which is incredible also. And then let's go backwards from that to RD1, which is a watch with exceptional loudness for a minute repeater, but arriving at that solution with a very interesting technology. Go for it, bro.
So RD1, the objective was to make it sound louder, even if you make a watch waterproof. And usually it's counterintuitive because you build the movement, you build the case, you add gaskets, and you dampen the sound, you mute it, okay? And so we kind of deconstructed the way it was built to consider it no more as a movement in a case, but as an instrument. And so on an instrument, you have the gongs. You can imagine the strings of a piano or violin. And the way they are attached to a specific shape and material is absolutely crucial. So we added what we call a soundboard, which is kind of a disc in titanium, and we fixed the gong on it. And so that piece resonates the sound, even if we put a gasket around it to make it waterproof.
Spectacular. John Mayer was saying that he has a blacked out Supersonnerie it's also called the Supersonnerie, right? Like that he just wears, and it's like the most discreet watch imaginable until you play the repeater, and then it's like the sound's like exploding off of his wrist, which is super cool. All right, okay, so and then another interesting thing to discuss is that RD5 represents the end of the RD series, and now we're shifting into another era of innovation at AP. Tell us about that.
So because we have explored the major group of complications in the RD series, we wanted to put an end on it. It's not meaning that we are stopping research and development at AP. On the contrary, we are building up new FabLabs, standing for Fabrication Laboratory, in which we're going to focus on different topics, materials, movement, cases, and we'll be entering this new journey with a lot of surprises to come.
So I want to just show you guys a close-up of something over here. It's like a camouflage of 3 different types of gold: white gold, rose gold, and yellow gold, and it's absolutely crazy looking. And that's what we mean about material innovation. And what's really cool about FabLab is you're talking about material innovation simultaneous to technical innovation as well, putting these things together as holistic projects. It was interesting because during the keynote of Dubai Watch Week with Mr. Hamed Siddiqui and Jean-Fred Dufour of Rolex, he talked about collaboration and competition and how both are healthy. Jean-Fred Dufour actually said it is so important that people continue to innovate because this is what keeps our industry relevant, exciting for the future, and connects even with the next generation. So you're doing some great work. So you guys understand why I was talking about him being like Maverick and Top Gun going to Mach 10. He does this every day, right? He needs a cake with a big L and another R, right?
I have a bigger team than them.
True. Thank you, brother. Much appreciated. Thank you guys for tuning in.